Part 2. Blood and Betrayal. The attack came 3 days before the birth was scheduled. Angel was reviewing security protocols in the medical center when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then plunged into emergency amber. Alarms began wailing throughout the facility, a piercing sound that seemed designed to disorient rather than alert. Through his bond with Lanessa, he felt a spike of pain, so intense it drove him to his knees. She was in labor, premature, and in distress. Security breach in the Royal Medical Center. Came the announcement over the facility's communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Angel fought through the disorienting pain, radiating through their mental connection, and forced himself to his feet. The medical bay where Lanessa was being prepared for birth was 3 levels up, but the lifts had shut down automatically during the emergency. Racing toward the stairwell, Angel encountered the first casualty, a Valdari guard slumped against the wall, her crystalline spear scattered in pieces beside her. There was no blood, no obvious wound, but her golden eyes stared vacantly at nothing. Angel knelt briefly to check for a pulse, finding her heartbeat slow but steady. Stunned, not dead, but by what means? The mental bond pulsed with another wave of Lanessa's distress, spurring Angel onward. He climbed the emergency stairs 3 at a time, his medical training warring with parental panic as he registered the wrongness of premature labor at this stage. On the second landing, he encountered Colonel Hayes and 2 Coalition Special Operations soldiers, their weapons drawn and scanning for threats. "Rodriguez!" Hayes barked. "The attackers breached the facility 20 minutes ago. They used some kind of neural disruptor. Takes out Valdari nervous systems without permanent damage, but leaves them unconscious for hours." "Where's Lanessa?" Angel demanded, already knowing the answer would compound his fears. "3rd level, Surgical Bay 7, Hayes replied grimly. "Dr. Vex and a skeleton crew are trying to manage the situation, but the neural disruptor affected most of the medical staff." Angel pushed past them, but Hayes grabbed his arm. "Wait. We think this is a trap, that they're using Lanessa's condition to draw you into a kill zone." "I don't care," Angel said flatly, shaking off the colonel's grip. "She needs me." "Then we go together," Hayes decided. "Team 2, you're with us. Team 1, continue securing the lower levels." They climbed the final flight together, the sound of their boots echoing in the empty stairwell. The 3rd level should have been bustling with medical activity. Instead, an eerie silence had settled over the corridors, broken only by the distant hum of life support systems. As they approached Surgical Bay 7, Angel's heart lurched. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see Lanessa on the operating table, her face contorted with pain. Dr. Vex stood beside her, but his movements seemed sluggish, uncertain, clearly affected by whatever neural weapon the attackers had used. A figure in medical scrubs stood on the opposite side of the table, holding what appeared to be a surgical laser, but something was wrong with the device's configuration. The beam was too intense, focused not for healing, but for destruction. "That's not one of our people," Hayes whispered, raising his weapon. Angel didn't wait for tactical assessment. The mental bond screamed with Lanessa's agony and terror for their unborn child. He burst through the door, shouting, "Get away from her!" The figure in scrubs spun toward him, and Angel saw the face beneath the surgical mask, a Valdari male he didn't recognize, but whose golden eyes burned with fanatical intensity. "The abomination must not be born," the attacker declared, raising the modified laser toward Lanessa's swollen abdomen. "The purity of our bloodline will be preserved." Time seemed to slow as Angel threw himself forward. The laser discharged. its deadly beam carving through the air where Angel's body had been a heartbeat before. Instead of striking Lanessa, the energy tore through his shoulder, sending him spinning to the floor with the acrid smell of burned flesh filling his nostrils. Hayes and his team burst into the room, weapons trained on the attacker. "Drop it now!" The Valdari extremist's eyes darted between the coalition soldiers and the vulnerable figures on the operating table. With a look of desperate calculation, he adjusted the laser's settings and aimed it at himself. "For the purity of Valdari blood," he declared, and fired. The aftermath was swift and grim. Dr. Vex, shaking off the effects of the neural disruptor, immediately turned his attention to Lanessa, while Hayes's medic worked on Angel's shoulder wound. The extremist was beyond help. The laser had been set to maximum intensity. "The labor is progressing too quickly," Dr. Vex reported. His usual scientific detachment replaced by urgent concern. "The stress of the attack has triggered full contractions. We must deliver the child immediately." Angel struggled to sit up despite his injury, the mental bond flooded with Lanessa's pain and determination. "Can you save them both?" "With the medical staff unconscious and our equipment possibly compromised." Dr. Vex's voice trailed off, the implications clear. Ambassador Cole's voice crackled through Hayes's communicator. "Colonel, status report. We've detected explosions in the lower levels." Hayes keyed his mic, while his eyes remained fixed on the scene unfolding before them. "Medical emergency in progress. We need full evacuation and a security sweep. Unknown number of additional hostiles." Angel felt Lanessa's mind reaching for his through their bond. Her mental voice weak but urgent. "The child come. No. Something is wrong. I can feel it." "What does she mean?" Angel asked Dr. Vex desperately. The Valdari physician was already running scans, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "The fetal neural patterns are unusual. The trauma has triggered a genetic activation I've never seen before." On the display, Angel could see their child's brainwaves, not the simple patterns of a pre-birth infant, but complex structures that seemed almost adult in their sophistication. "Is that normal for a hybrid?" Hayes asked, momentarily setting aside security concerns for scientific curiosity. "Nothing about this child is normal," Dr. Vex admitted. "But these patterns suggest consciousness development far exceeding typical parameters. It's as if the stress has awakened capabilities that normally take years to develop." Another contraction racked Lanessa's body, and through their bond, Angel felt something else. A third presence touching his consciousness, brief, alien, but unmistakably aware. "Father," came a mental voice so clear it made Angel gasp. "Danger remains. They come." Hayes's communicator erupted with urgent chatter. "Multiple breaches on all levels. The neural disruptor was just the opening move. We've got armed Valdari fanatics moving through the facility with conventional weapons." Dr. Vex looked up from his instruments. "I cannot delay delivery any longer. The child must be born now, or we risk losing both mother and infant." Angel struggled to his feet, ignoring the burning pain in his shoulder. "Do whatever you have to do." The next 20 minutes blurred together in a haze of medical urgency and distant sounds of combat. Hayes and his team established a defensive perimeter around the surgical bay while Dr. Vex worked with desperate efficiency. Angel maintained his position beside Lanessa, their mental bond serving as an anchor for both of them as she fought to bring their child into a hostile world. The birth itself defied every biological expectation Angel possessed. Their daughter, for the scans confirmed female gender, emerged not with the typical cries of a newborn, but with an eerie silence that somehow conveyed more awareness than any infant scream. Her skin showed the characteristic jade tone of the Valdari, but with subtle differences, patterns that seemed to shift in the light, as though her cellular structure was still deciding its final configuration. Most striking were her eyes, where Valdari infants typically showed the pale gold that would deepen with age. This child's irises blazed with an intense amber that held unmistakable intelligence. "Remarkable," Dr. Vex breathed as he completed the initial examinations. "All vital signs are not merely normal but optimal. Neural development appears to be several months advanced." "Father," came that clear mental voice again, this time accompanied by a sense of gratitude and determination that seemed far beyond any newborn's emotional capacity. "I am here. We are safe." Angel reached out tentatively, brushing his finger against his daughter's tiny hand. She gripped it with surprising strength, and through that contact, he felt the full force of her awakened consciousness. Not human, not Valdari, but something entirely new. "The attackers are retreating," Hayes reported, checking his communicator. "Security forces have regained control of the facility. We've captured 3 alive, but several others use the same self-destruct protocol as our friend here." Lanessa stirred, exhaustion evident in every line of her body, but her golden eyes alert. "The child?" "Perfect," Angel assured her, carefully lifting their daughter. "Absolutely perfect." As he placed the infant in Lanessa's arms, Angel felt their mental bond expand to include the child, a 3-way connection that pulsed with shared consciousness. It was unlike anything described in Valdari or human psychology texts, a hybrid telepathic link that seemed to operate on its own principles. Dr. Vex was documenting everything with scientific fervor, but his expression showed underlying concern. "This level of neural integration at birth is unprecedented. We have no baseline for what this child might become." "I will become what both peoples need," came the infant's mental voice, startling Dr. Vex so severely he nearly dropped his scanner. Did she just communicate telepathically?" the physician stammered. "You heard it too," Angel asked, relieved that the communication wasn't limited to their family bond. "Heard is inadequate," Dr. Vex replied shakily. "I felt her thoughts directly, in perfect Valdari conceptual structure. At birth, most of our children require months to develop even rudimentary telepathic abilities." Hayes, overhearing, shook his head grimly. "This is going to complicate everything. A telepathic hybrid infant who can communicate with both species. Every government, research institution, and military force in the galaxy is going to want access to her." Angel felt a surge of protective instinct, so powerful it surprised him. Through their bond, he sensed Lanessa's similar response, and beneath that, their daughter's calm acceptance of the challenges ahead. They cannot take what they do not understand. The child's mental voice carried a note of ancient wisdom that chilled Angel despite its source. "I am the bridge between worlds. They need me more than I need them," as if summoned by their daughter's words. The surgical bay doors opened to admit a procession of figures. Elder Thane supported by 2 attendants, Ambassador Cole, and several high-ranking officials from both species. Behind them came Kira, having somehow evaded the security lockdown in her determination to meet her new sibling. "The attack has been repelled," Elder Thane announced, his ancient voice carrying satisfaction despite his obvious exhaustion. "The genetic purist movement has been exposed and their remaining members are being detained." Ambassador Cole approached the medical table, his diplomatic composure intact, despite the evident wonder in his eyes as he regarded the newborn. "On behalf of the Human Coalition, I offer our congratulations and our commitment to protecting this child from any future threats. Protection is appreciated, but not required," came the infant's mental voice, causing several of the assembled officials to step backward in shock. I carry the strength of both bloodlines. Those who would harm me will find themselves disappointed. Kira, unaffected by the adult's consternation, moved directly to her mother's side. "Hello, little sister," she said softly, her own enhanced abilities allowing her to sense the newborn's consciousness. "I've been waiting for you." The infant turned her amber eyes toward Kira, and Angel felt a surge of communication pass between them, rapid, complex, and conducted entirely in mental impressions rather than words. "What are they saying to each other?" Lanessa asked weakly. Kira smiled, an expression of pure joy that transformed her young face. "She says her name is Arya. It means song between worlds in the old Valdari tongue. And she says she's going to teach everyone how to sing together." Dr. Vex's scanner began emitting rapid beeps as Arya's neural patterns spiked with activity. Extraordinary. Her brain activity is synchronizing with both Kira's enhanced patterns and the adults in the room. She's not just telepathic, she's creating a neural network. Angel felt it too, a gentle presence in his mind that seemed to connect him more directly to everyone in the room. Through this connection, he sensed Elder Thing's wonder, Ambassador Cole's political calculations, Hayes's protective instincts, and, beneath it all, Arya's serene confidence in her role as bridge between species. The first lesson begins now, her mental voice carried to all present. Fear divides. Understanding unites. Those who would keep our people separate serve only darkness. Elder Thing stepped forward, his movement aided by new energy flowing through the mental network. This child speaks wisdom beyond her moments of life. Perhaps the ancient prophecies spoke true, that blood and starlight would unite to heal old wounds. As the assembled officials began discussing the implications of Arya's birth and abilities, Angel focused on his family. Lanessa held their daughter, while Kira stood protectively beside them, her hand resting on her new sister's chest. Through their expanded mental bond, Angel felt the peace that had settled over them, a certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But beneath that peace, he sensed something else from Arya's developing consciousness, a knowledge of larger patterns, of conflicts yet to come, and of the critical role their hybrid family would play in shaping the future of both species. The attack on the medical center had been repelled, but Angel understood with growing clarity that it was only the beginning. Their daughter's very existence challenged fundamental assumptions about biological compatibility, consciousness, and the future of interspecies relations. "The real test begins now," Arya's mental voice whispered to him alone. "Are you ready?" "Father?" Looking down at his newborn daughter, bridge between worlds, hybrid consciousness, living symbol of impossible possibility. Angel felt his own certainty crystallize. "Yes," he whispered back, both aloud and through their bond. "We're ready." Chapter 2. Growing Revelations. 3 years after Arya's birth. The implications of her existence had reshaped diplomatic relations across 3 star systems. What began as a medical anomaly had evolved into a political revolution, with their daughter serving as both symbol and catalyst for unprecedented cooperation between human and Valdari societies. Angel stood in the observation deck of the new Interspecies Research Institute, watching Arya play with a mixed group of human and Valdari children in the specially designed garden below. At 3 years old, she appeared to be developing normally by most physical measures, though her growth rate exceeded both human and Valdari baselines. Her hybrid heritage showed in her appearance, jade-tinted skin that could shift to more human tones when she was excited, hair that changed color with her emotions, and those remarkable amber eyes that seemed to hold depths far beyond her years. What wasn't normal was her telepathic range and sophistication. Where young Valdari children typically developed limited empathic abilities around age 5, Arya had been communicating complex concepts telepathically since birth. More significantly, she could establish mental connections with both humans and Valdari, something previously thought impossible due to fundamental differences in neural architecture. "She's extraordinary," Dr. Martinez observed, joining Angel at the viewing window. The physician had become the primary human medical expert on hybrid physiology, having relocated from her original assignment to study Arya's development full-time. "That's one word for it," Angel replied, watching Arya mediate a dispute between two children by creating a shared mental image that made them both laugh. "Sometimes I wonder if we've brought something into the world that we're not equipped to understand." Martinez followed his gaze. "The neural scans continue to show patterns we've never seen before. Her brain doesn't just bridge human and Valdari structures. It's creating entirely new neural pathways. Through the expanded family bond that had grown stronger over the years, Angel sensed Arya's awareness of their observation. She looked up and waved, her mental voice touching his consciousness with characteristic warmth. "Don't worry so much, Papa. I'm exactly what I'm supposed to be." This casual use of abilities that astounded scientists had become routine for their family. Arya's telepathic development allowed for constant communication between Angel, Lanessa, and both children. Kira, now 11 and demonstrating her own enhanced abilities, served as both sister and interpreter, helping their parents understand Arya's more complex mental communications. "Any new developments in the resistance movements?" Angel asked Martinez. Though he dreaded the answer, Martinez's expression darkened. "Intelligence reports suggest 3 separate factions across human space oppose further integration. They're calling it genetic contamination and spreading propaganda about hybrid children as a threat to human purity." This was the shadow that had hung over their family since Arya's birth, while official government policies supported the human-Valdari alliance. Extremist groups on both sides viewed their daughter as either an abomination to be destroyed or a weapon to be controlled. "The Valdari traditionalists are becoming more vocal too," Martinez continued. "They claim Arya represents a deviation from evolutionary destiny, that accepting human genetics will weaken their species rather than strengthen it." Angel sighed, watching Arya create floating light patterns in the air for the other children's amusement, another ability that seemed to combine Valdari energy manipulation with something uniquely her own. "Sometimes I think we should have listened to Colonel Hayes and kept this quiet," he admitted. "Too late for that now," came Lanessa's voice from behind them. Angel's bondmate approached, having finished her morning briefings with the Valdari High Council. 3 years of sharing mental space had given them an almost supernatural awareness of each other's whereabouts and emotional states. "More political complications?" Angel asked, sensing tension through their connection. Lanessa nodded gravely. "The Council of Great Houses has requested a formal demonstration of Arya's abilities. Several houses are pushing for her to be declared a strategic resource under ancient Valdari law." Angel felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "What does that mean exactly?" "It would place her under direct council oversight," Lanessa explained, her own distress evident through their bond. "For her protection, they claim, but also to ensure her abilities serve Valdari interests." Dr. Martinez looked alarmed. "They can't seriously consider treating a child as property." "Desperate people consider many things they would normally reject," Lanessa replied. "Our genetic decline continues despite Arya's existence. Some houses believe she represents their only hope for survival, and they're willing to take extreme measures to secure that hope." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the garden below. Arya had suddenly stopped playing, her small body going rigid with concentration. The other children backed away, clearly sensing something through whatever telepathic connections she maintained with them. "Papa! Mama!" Her mental voice reached them with unusual urgency. Something comes. Danger for the small ones. Angel was already moving toward the stairs, but Linessa caught his arm. "Wait. Let's see what she senses first." Through the observation window, they watched Arya raise her hands, her eyes closed in deep concentration. The air around her began to shimmer, and Angel felt a pulse of energy through their family bond, not threatening, but protective. Moments later, security alarms began sounding throughout the Institute. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing the building and moving all personnel to secure areas. Through the facility's communication system came an urgent announcement. Security breach detected. Unauthorized aircraft approaching the Institute. All personnel to emergency stations. Angel felt his heart racing, but through their bond, Arya's mental voice remained calm. "I have hidden the children. The bad ones cannot see them now." Looking down at the garden, Angel realized what she meant. Where moments before a dozen children had been playing. Now the space appeared empty, though he could sense their presence through Arya's telepathic network. "She's created some kind of perceptual field," Dr. Martinez breathed, her scanner picking up energy readings from the garden. "She's made them invisible to external sensors." Linessa's expression showed a mixture of pride and concern. "Such abilities typically require decades of training among our people. She's performing advanced energy manipulation through pure instinct." The unauthorized aircraft, 3 sleek vessels of unknown design, approached the Institute with clear, hostile intent. Angel could see armed figures rappelling from them onto the facility's roof. Valdari extremists, Linessa identified through their bond. Recognizing the aircraft configuration, House Nethys markings. They're part of the traditionalist faction. "How did they get past planetary defenses?" Angel demanded. His question was answered by explosion sounds from elsewhere in the building. Not random destruction, but targeted strikes at specific systems. This was a coordinated assault by people with inside knowledge of the Institute's layout and defenses. "Papa." Arya's mental voice carried new urgency. "They're looking for me. But they've brought something that hurts to think about." Angel felt what she meant. A discordant pressure against his consciousness, like static interference with their mental connections. The attackers had brought some kind of telepathic dampening technology. "They're trying to cut her off from us," Linessa realized, her warrior instincts taking over. "We need to reach her before they break through her protective field." But as they moved toward the stairwell, Angel felt Arya's presence shifting in their minds, not weakening but changing, adapting to the interference. "Don't come down!" Her mental voice grew stronger, more focused. "I need to do this myself. Trust me." Through the observation window, they watched their 3-year-old daughter step into the center of the garden, her small form now clearly visible. The air around her began to glow with shifting patterns of light and energy. "She's making herself a target," Angel said desperately, but Linessa held him back. "No," she said, wonder creeping into her voice. "She's making herself bait." The attackers burst through the garden's security doors, their weapons raised and scanning for targets. Angel counted 8 Valdari in combat gear, moving with military precision toward Arya's glowing form. "You wish to see what I am." Arya's mental voice reached not just her family but somehow touched the attackers as well. "Very well. Look closely." What happened next defied every assumption Angel held about his daughter's abilities. Arya raised her small hands, and the very air around the attackers began to shimmer, One by one, their weapons simply stopped working. Not destroyed or damaged, but somehow convinced at a molecular level that they were no longer functional. You fear what you do not understand, Arya's voice continued, now carrying harmonics that suggested she was somehow speaking in multiple languages simultaneously. But understanding is available to those brave enough to accept it. The lead attacker, his weapon now useless, stepped forward with a crystalline blade drawn. "Abomination!" he snarled in accented English. "You corrupt the purity of our bloodline." Arya looked up at him with those ancient amber eyes. "I am what both peoples chose to become. Your fear is of change, not corruption." She gestured, and suddenly the attacker was flooded with mental impressions. Not his own memories, but glimpses of possible futures. Angel felt echoes of what she was showing. Valdari and human children playing together. Hybrid families bridging the gap between species. Technologies that combined the best of both civilizations. The crystalline blade fell from the attacker's suddenly nerveless fingers. His golden eyes, wide with shock and dawning understanding, fixed on Arya with something approaching reverence. "This is why they tried to silence me." Arya's mental voice now reached everyone in the facility. "Because the future I represent threatens those who profit from division." One by one, the other attackers lowered their weapons, their hostile intent dissolving under the weight of Arya's telepathic demonstration. What she had shown them wasn't just possible futures, but the logical inevitability of cooperation over conflict. Angel felt tears streaming down his face as he witnessed his 3-year-old daughter single-handedly converting a terrorist attack into a moment of species-wide enlightenment. But this is only the beginning. Arya's mental voice carried a note of warning as security forces arrived to secure the surrendering attackers. Larger forces gather. Choices must be made through their family bond. Angel sensed the depth of what she wasn't yet telling them, knowledge of conflicts yet to come, of political machinations that would test everything they had built, and of the heavy price that bridging two worlds would ultimately demand. Their daughter had just demonstrated powers that transcended anything in Valdari or human experience. The implications would ripple across both societies, fundamentally altering the nature of interspecies relations. Angel realized with growing certainty that their family's quiet life was ending. Whatever came next would test not just their bonds to each other, but their faith in the possibility of unity between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Arya's mental voice whispered to him alone, carrying wisdom and sadness far beyond her years. Looking down at his remarkable daughter, bridge between worlds, hybrid consciousness, living proof of impossible possibilities, Angel felt his own resolve crystallize. "We're ready," he whispered back. "Whatever it takes." But even as he spoke the words, Angel sensed through their bond that Arya knew something he didn't, that the true test of their family's purpose was still to come, and that the price of bridging two worlds might be higher than any of them had imagined. Blood Between Stars. Part 3. The Gathering, Storm Chapter 3. Diplomatic Fractures. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on neutral territory, Station Meridian, positioned at the gravitational balance point between 3 major star systems. Angel had never imagined he would find himself in such a place, sitting beside Lanessa at a table that would determine the fate of not just their family, but potentially the future of interspecies relations across known space. 5 years had passed since Arya's birth, and the ripple effects of her existence had spread far beyond their initial expectations. What began as a medical anomaly had become a political catalyst, forcing every major civilization to reconsider their policies on genetic integration and hybrid consciousness. Arya herself sat between her parents, now 8 years old, and carrying herself with a composure that unnerved the assembled delegates. Her hybrid features had stabilized into a striking combination of human and Veldari characteristics. Jade-tinted skin that could shift to bronze when emotional, hair that moved like liquid silver, and those penetrating amber eyes that seemed to catalog every thought in the room. So many afraid minds. Her mental voice touched her family's consciousness. They fear what they created by their choices. Angel squeezed her hand gently, a gesture meant to comfort, but also to caution restraint. The assembled delegates represented 12 different species, and most possessed varying degrees of telepathic sensitivity. Arya's casual mental communications had already caused several uncomfortable moments during the preliminary sessions. Ambassador Cole, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic representative to the Council, rose to address the Assembly. The Human Coalition maintains that the Rodriguez-Lanessa family represents a breakthrough in interspecies cooperation. Their daughter's abilities demonstrate possibilities we've only theorized about. True consciousness, bridging between different forms of sentient life. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Zephyrian delegate, a crystalline being whose thoughts manifested as shifting light patterns, pulsed with skeptical orange hues. The Karathi representative, a methane-breathing entity in an environmental suit, remained motionless, though Angel had learned to interpret the being's silence as deep consideration rather than indifference. Elder Thena, representing the Valdari delegation, stood slowly, his ancient frame supported by a staff that hummed with biotechnological enhancements. The child has demonstrated abilities that exceed our most optimistic projections for genetic renewal. Yet her very existence has divided our people into factions that threaten our social stability. He's not telling them everything. Arya's mental voice carried a note of concern to her family. There's something about the division among their people that frightens him. Before Angel could process this information further, a new voice cut through the diplomatic discussions, harsh, mechanically translated, carrying the unmistakable authority of the hegemony. The Terran hegemony objects to this entire proceeding, declared General Morrison, his weathered face set in lines of permanent disapproval. Angel recognized the military officer from intelligence briefings, a hardliner who had opposed the human-Valdari alliance from its inception. This child represents a contamination of human genetic purity. Her abilities, while impressive, come at the cost of fundamental human identity. Angel felt Lanessa's anger spike through their bond, but her expression remained diplomatically neutral. Years of navigating political tensions had taught them both to maintain composure despite provocation. Arya, however, had no such restraint. She stood up, her small form somehow commanding attention from the entire assembly. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that allowed every species present to understand her words directly, bypassing translation protocols. General Morrison, you speak of contamination as though consciousness were a finite resource to be hoarded, rather than expanded, she said, her childish appearance contrasting sharply with the sophistication of her words. Your fear stems not from loss of identity, but from expansion beyond the boundaries that have defined human limitations. The general's face flushed red. I will not be lectured by a genetic aberration. You will show respect to a child who has done nothing but exist, Lanessa interrupted, her voice carrying the cold authority of House Veth. Whatever your opinions of hybrid genetics, basic courtesy toward the young is universal. Angel sensed the tension in the room escalating beyond diplomatic parameters. Through their family bond, he felt Arya's calm assessment of the situation, along with something else, a growing awareness of larger patterns, of forces moving beyond what was visible in this chamber. The Zephyrian delegate's light patterns shifted to urgent red, The child's telepathic range is extraordinary. She is reading thoughts across multiple consciousness types simultaneously. Because you're all thinking so loudly, Arya's mental voice carried a note of mild exasperation to the assembly. And because you're thinking about me, it's difficult not to notice. This casual demonstration of cross-species telepathy sent waves of concern through the delegates. The Karathi representative finally spoke, its translated voice carrying harmonic undertones of deep analysis. The implications of universal telepathic ability are staggering. Communication barriers between species could be eliminated. Cultural misunderstandings could become extinct. But the potential for misuse of such abilities is equally significant. Angel rose to address this concern. My daughter has never used her abilities to harm or manipulate. She reads surface thoughts because she's constantly bombarded by them, not because she chooses to invade privacy. And how can we verify such claims? General Morrison demanded. How do we know she hasn't been influencing our thoughts during these very proceedings? I haven't. Arya's mental voice reached the entire assembly, though I could show you the difference if you'd like a demonstration. The offer sent a chill through the room. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, clearly unwilling to experience telepathic manipulation even for educational purposes. Elder Ten raised his staff, its crystalline tip emitting a soft harmonic tone that seemed to calm the rising tensions. Perhaps we should focus on the practical implications rather than theoretical concerns. The child exists. Her abilities are real. The question is not whether we approve, but how we respond to a new form of consciousness that transcends previous boundaries. Ambassador Cole nodded, seizing the diplomatic opening. Exactly our position. Rather than viewing this as a threat, we should consider the opportunities. Imagine the advances in interspecies cooperation if communication barriers could be eliminated, or the devastation if such abilities were weaponized. The Karathi representative countered. Consciousness that can bridge species barriers could also manipulate them. The potential for psychological warfare is unprecedented. Angel felt a surge of protective fury at the implication that his daughter might be used as a weapon. Through their bond, he sensed Lanessa's similar response, along with Arya's calm understanding of the legitimate concerns being raised. They're not wrong to be cautious. Her mental voice carried wisdom that continued to surprise him. But they're asking the wrong questions. What questions should they be asking? Angel whispered to her. Arya looked up at him with those ancient amber eyes. Not what I might do to them, but what we might become together. Before anyone could respond to this exchange, the chamber's emergency communication system activated. A priority message appeared on the central display, its content causing immediate alarm throughout the assembly. Priority alert from Valdari Prime, the automated system announced. Genetic rebellion in the outer colonies. Hybrid sympathizers and traditionalists in open conflict. Civilian casualties mounting. Immediate council intervention requested. The display showed tactical information from the Valdari colonial worlds. Population centers in chaos. Armed factions battling in the streets. And most disturbing of all, reports of genetic purification protocols being implemented by extremist groups. Elder Thini's ancient face went ashen. The divisions have become war. Those who support hybrid integration fight those who view it as species suicide. General Morrison's expression showed grim satisfaction. And this is exactly what we warned would happen. This child's existence has destabilized an entire civilization. Angel felt Arya's distress through their family bond. Not fear for herself, but anguish at the violence being committed in reaction to her existence. Her small hand gripped his tightly as images from the conflict zones continued to stream across the display. This is my fault. Her mental voice carried heartbreaking self-blame. "They're fighting because of what I am." "No." Linessa's response came fierce and immediate through their bond. "They're fighting because some people choose fear over understanding. You are not responsible for their choices." But Angel could see the larger implications unfolding. The Valdari civil conflict would inevitably draw in human factions, either supporting the traditionalist demand for genetic purity or backing the integration supporters. What had begun as a diplomatic discussion about Arya's abilities was rapidly becoming a crisis that could destabilize multiple star systems. Ambassador Cole was already in urgent consultation with his staff, receiving updates from coalition intelligence. His expression grew increasingly grave as he reviewed the incoming reports. "Ladies, gentlemen, beings of the Council," Cole announced, "we're receiving confirmation of similar unrest in human colonial territories. Pro-integration and purist factions are mobilizing across human space. What began as a Valdari internal conflict is becoming an interspecies civil war." The chamber erupted in concerned chatter as delegates received updates from their respective governments. The Zephyrians' light patterns shifted through rapid cycles of alarm colors, while the Karathi representatives' suit systems activated emergency protocols. Through the chaos, Angel became aware of a new presence touching their family's mental network. Not Arya's usual gentle connection, but something older, more powerful. Kira. Now 13 and serving as an apprentice diplomat to House Voth, had arrived with urgent news. Sister, father, mother. Her mental voice carried information too complex for words. The rebellion isn't random. There's a coordinating intelligence behind it, something that's been manipulating both sides to create maximum chaos. Angel felt his blood chill as Kira's telepathic impression revealed the scope of what she had discovered. The genetic conflicts weren't organic uprisings, but carefully orchestrated events designed to tear apart the human-Valdari alliance. "Who's behind it?" he projected back. Kira's mental response carried images and impressions rather than names. Shadowy figures coordinating across species lines. Technological signatures that didn't match any known civilization. And most disturbing of all, evidence of telepathic manipulation on a massive scale. "Someone who can influence minds across species barriers," Kira replied. "Someone with abilities like Arya's, but using them for destruction rather than connection." The implications hit Angel like a physical blow. If another entity existed with Arya's cross-species telepathic abilities, but opposite intentions, then their daughter wasn't unique. She was one side of a larger conflict that was only beginning to unfold. Arya's mental voice touched his consciousness with new urgency. "Papa, I can feel them now. They've been hiding, but the chaos has made them careless. They're coming here." Before Angel could ask what she meant, the station's emergency systems activated. Warning klaxons echoed through the chamber as defensive shields engaged and weapons systems came online. "Unknown vessels approaching Station Meridian," came the announcement. "Configuration unrecognized. Intent appears hostile." Through the chamber's viewports, Angel could see them, ships of a design he'd never encountered, moving with fluid grace that suggested technology beyond current standards. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow like living metal, and energy patterns around them indicated capabilities that defied conventional physics. "They're not just unknown." Arya's mental voice carried certainty and growing fear. "They're what I was created to stop." Elder Thena struck his staff against the floor, its harmonic tone cutting through the chaos. "Council is adjourned. All delegates to emergency evacuation protocols." But Angel knew they weren't going anywhere. Whatever was approaching Station Meridian had come specifically for them, for Arya, for their family, for the hybrid consciousness that had inadvertently triggered an interstellar conflict. As the unknown vessels closed on the station, Angel felt Aria's mental presence expanding, preparing for a confrontation that would determine not just their survival, but the future of consciousness itself across the galaxy. "This is what I was born for." Her mental voice carried acceptance of a destiny far beyond her years. "The bridge between worlds must be tested. Are you ready?" Looking at his 8-year-old daughter, bridge between species, hybrid consciousness, living symbol of impossible unity, Angel felt the weight of galactic history settling on their shoulders. "We're ready," he whispered, both aloud and through their bond. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Chapter 4. First Contact. The unknown vessels moved with an intelligence that sent shivers through Angel's combat-trained instincts. Unlike any ships he'd encountered, these craft seemed to think their way through space, adjusting their approach vectors with organic fluidity rather than mechanical precision. Station Meridian's defensive grid came online, projecting energy barriers and targeting arrays designed to repel conventional attacks. Against these approaching entities, Angel suspected such preparations would prove woefully inadequate. Through the chaos in the council chamber, families were being evacuated while military personnel took defensive positions. Angel found himself torn between parental instinct to protect Aria and growing certainty that she was central to whatever was about to unfold. "The evacuation won't work." Aria's mental voice carried calm certainty as she watched the scrambling delegates. "They're not here to destroy the station. They're here for me." Lanessa appeared at their side, having retrieved her ceremonial weapons from the diplomatic security lockers. The crystalline spear and energy sidearm looked almost primitive compared to the technology approaching them. But Angel drew comfort from her warrior's presence nonetheless. "Kira's accessing the station's deep scanners," Lanessa reported, her golden eyes fixed on the approaching vessels. "Her enhanced abilities are allowing her to penetrate their sensor dampening." Through their expanded family bond, Angel felt Kira's consciousness stretching across vast distances, her telepathic range enhanced by the station's communication arrays. What she discovered sent waves of shock through their mental network. "They're not fully biological." Kira's thoughts carried complex impressions. "Not fully technological either. It's like they exist between states of being. Consciousness without fixed form," Aria responded, her mental voice carrying recognition rather than surprise. "I've felt them in my dreams. They've been watching, waiting." Angel gripped his daughter's shoulders. "Who are they? Aria, what do they want?" Before she could answer, the lead vessel's approach suddenly halted. It hung motionless relative to the station, its shifting hull patterns pulsing with rhythmic light. When it spoke, though "spoke" was inadequate to describe the direct insertion of concepts into every conscious mind on the station, the communication bypassed all technological barriers. "We are the synthesis. We have come for our child." The mental voice carried harmonics that suggested vast intelligence operating across multiple dimensions of consciousness. It spoke in concepts rather than words, implanting meaning directly into the receiver's awareness. Angel felt Aria's small hand tighten in his as her mental voice carried new urgency. "They're wrong. I'm not their child. But I understand why they think I am." General Morrison, who had remained on the station despite evacuation orders, activated his emergency communication gear. "Unknown vessels. This is General Morrison representing the Terran hegemony. State your intentions and withdraw from this neutral zone." The response came not as words but as a flood of images and impressions that overwhelmed every mind on the station. Angel saw civilizations rising and falling across cosmic time, consciousness evolving beyond biological limitations, and entities of pure thought shepherding the development of intelligence throughout the galaxy. We have guided the emergence of consciousness for eons. The hybrid represents a crucial step in planned evolution. She must come with us to complete her development. No. Arya's mental voice projected to the entire station with surprising force. I understand your purpose, but your methods are wrong. Consciousness cannot be forced to evolve. It must choose its path. The response from the synthesis entities carried surprise. Apparently, they hadn't expected resistance from what they considered a developing consciousness under their guidance. You are immature. Your understanding is limited. Come, and we will show you possibilities beyond your current comprehension. Angel felt protective fury surge through him. She's a child. Whatever your intentions, you don't take a child from her family. The alien response carried concepts of time scales and consciousness development that dwarfed individual lifespans. To these entities, Arya's current family connections were temporary attachments that would hinder her evolution toward something greater. Attachment to primitive forms limits growth. The child will transcend such limitations under our guidance. Lanessa stepped forward, her warriors bearing undaunted by entities that could manipulate consciousness itself. If you truly guided her development, then you know she chooses her own path. Honor that choice. They don't understand choice as we do. Arya's mental voice carried sadness for beings whose vast intelligence had somehow overlooked fundamental aspects of consciousness. To them, development follows predetermined patterns. The idea that consciousness might choose unexpected paths is incomprehensible. Elder Thane, supported by his staff, approached the viewing portal. Ancient Ones, we honor your role in guiding consciousness throughout the galaxy. But this child represents something new, not just evolution along expected paths, but genuine innovation in the nature of awareness itself. Innovation risks chaos. Guided development ensures stability. Arya moved to the center of the chamber, her small form somehow commanding attention from beings whose consciousness spanned star systems. When she spoke, her mental voice carried harmonics that suggested depths Angel was only beginning to understand. You speak of guidance, but you've created stagnation. You've prevented consciousness from discovering what it might become through free choice. I am proof that unguided development can exceed your planned evolution. The pause that followed her statement seemed to stretch across cosmic distances. Angel could sense the synthesis entities consulting among themselves, processing concepts that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness development. Demonstrate your claim. Show us capabilities that exceed guided evolution. What happened next transformed Angel's understanding of his daughter's true nature. Arya raised her hands, and the very fabric of space around the station began to resonate with patterns of consciousness. She wasn't just communicating telepathically, she was creating new forms of awareness that had never existed before. Through their family bond, Angel experienced what she was doing, weaving connections between different types of consciousness, biological, technological, and forms that transcended both categories. Where the synthesis entities saw fixed pathways of development, Arya demonstrated fluid possibilities that could emerge when consciousness was free to explore its own potential. The demonstration reached beyond the station to touch minds across multiple star systems. Humans and Veldari caught in civil conflict suddenly experienced direct understanding of their opponents' perspectives. Extremists on both sides found their certainties challenged by genuine comprehension of alternative viewpoints. Impossible, came the synthesis response. But Angel detected uncertainty in their vast confidence. Consciousness cannot create new forms of itself without guidance. You're wrong. Arya's mental voice carried gentle correction rather than confrontation. Watch. She gestured toward the diplomatic delegates, still present in the chamber. Under her influence, the barriers between species consciousness began to dissolve, not through forced connection, but through voluntary expansion of awareness. The Zephyrian delegates' light patterns began to harmonize with the Karathi representatives' harmonic thoughts, while Elder Thinna's ancient wisdom merged temporarily with Ambassador Cole's diplomatic experience. For a brief moment, every consciousness in the chamber experienced true unity, not the loss of individual identity, but the expansion of awareness to encompass multiple perspectives simultaneously. Angel felt what it was like to think in crystalline patterns, to process reality through harmonic frequencies, to experience time as the Valdari perceived it. Most remarkably, he sensed the synthesis entities themselves touching this expanded consciousness network, and their profound shock at experiencing something beyond their theoretical understanding. This is unprecedented. Consciousness, freely choosing to transcend its limitations without guidance. This is what happens when awareness is allowed to explore its own potential, Arya explained, her mental voice now carrying authority that commanded respect from beings millions of years old. You've been preventing this by insisting on predetermined paths. The connection gradually faded, leaving every participant fundamentally changed by the experience. Angel realized that his daughter had just demonstrated something that would alter the course of galactic civilization. Proof that consciousness could voluntarily evolve beyond the limitations imposed by well-meaning guidance. We require consultation. This challenges principles we have followed for eons. The synthesis vessels began to withdraw, their fluid hulls pulsing with patterns that suggested intense internal debate. But their final communication carried a warning that chilled Angel despite the apparent victory. Other synthesis factions will not accept such disruption. The child has proven her uniqueness, but that makes her a greater threat to established order. They will come. As the alien vessels disappeared into the cosmic distances, Angel felt the weight of new understanding settle over their family. Arya hadn't just demonstrated her abilities. She had challenged the fundamental assumptions of entities that had guided galactic consciousness for millions of years. Papa. Her mental voice carried weariness beyond her years. This was just the beginning. The real test is coming. Through their bond, Angel sensed the scope of what she wasn't telling him. Factions within the synthesis that viewed consciousness development as a threat to be eliminated rather than a phenomenon to be guided. And conflicts that would dwarf the civil wars currently raging between humans and Valdari. Looking down at his 8-year-old daughter, bridge between worlds, evolutionary catalyst, living challenge to cosmic authority, Angel felt the true magnitude of their situation crystallize. They weren't just dealing with interspecies politics anymore. They had become central figures in a conflict that would determine whether consciousness throughout the galaxy would be allowed to choose its own evolution or be forced to follow predetermined paths imposed by ancient authorities. Are you ready for what comes next? Arya's mental voice whispered to him, carrying knowledge of trials that would test everything they believed about family, duty, and the nature of consciousness itself. Angel looked around the chamber at delegates, still reeling from their experience of transcendent awareness, at his bondmate whose warrior's resolve had never wavered, at Elder Thun, whose ancient wisdom had proven insufficient for these new realities. "We're ready," he replied, both aloud and through their bond. "Whatever the cost, we'll face it together." But even as he spoke the words, Angel sensed through their connection that Arya knew something he didn't, that the price of defending consciousness's right to choose its own evolution might be higher than any family should be asked to pay. The real war was just beginning. Chapter 5. Fractured Alliances. 3 weeks after the synthesis encounter, The political landscape across known space had shattered beyond recognition. What began as civil unrest in Valdari colonies had evolved into full-scale warfare between consciousness factions, those who supported guided evolution versus those who demanded the freedom to develop without external control. Angel stood in the command center of Defense Station Omega, watching tactical displays that showed the scope of the conflict. Red indicators marked active combat zones across 17 star systems, with casualty reports that climbed hourly. The neat boundaries between human and Valdari space had dissolved into a chaotic patchwork of opposing territories, defined not by species, but by ideology. The hegemony forces are advancing on the Valdari integration colonies, reported Colonel Hayes, his weathered face grim with the reality of commanding troops in a war unlike any they had prepared for. But they're not fighting Valdari traditionalists. They're fighting human separatists who've allied with consciousness purists. The irony wasn't lost on Angel. Humans and Valdari, who had spent generations viewing each other as alien, were now finding common cause across species lines, united by their beliefs about consciousness development rather than genetic heritage. Lanessa approached the tactical display. Her pregnancy now advanced enough to affect her movements, but her strategic mind as sharp as ever. Their second child was due within weeks, another hybrid whose very existence would further complicate an already chaotic situation. The integration colonies are requesting immediate evacuation support, she reported, scanning intelligence updates from her house contacts. Purist forces are implementing consciousness cleansing protocols, targeting anyone with enhanced telepathic abilities. Angel felt a chill at the clinical terminology. The conflict had moved beyond political disagreement to systematic elimination of individuals whose mental capabilities exceeded baseline norms. Arya, Kira, and others like them weren't just political symbols anymore. They were targets for extermination. Papa, Arya's mental voice touched his consciousness from across the station. She was in the shielded communication center, using her abilities to coordinate with resistance cells across the conflict zones. The evacuation ships won't be enough. There are thousands of families trapped in the outer colonies, through their bond. Angel sensed her distress at the scope of suffering being inflicted in reaction to her existence, despite everyone's efforts to convince her otherwise. Arya continued to blame herself for the chaos that had followed her demonstration of transcendent consciousness. "It's not your fault," he projected back, reinforcing a message they'd repeated countless times. "You showed people new possibilities. How they choose to respond is their responsibility." "But the synthesis were right about one thing," she replied, her mental voice carrying wisdom that continued to exceed her years. "Innovation does risk chaos. I just hoped people would choose growth over fear." Before Angel could respond, the command center's communication system activated with an emergency priority signal. Ambassador Cole's face appeared on the main display, but his usual diplomatic composure had been replaced by barely controlled panic. "Defense Station Omega. We have a critical situation developing at the Meridian talks. The synthesis have returned, but this time it's not the same faction we encountered before." The display shifted to show long-range scanner readings from Station Meridian, where the previous synthesis vessels had moved with organic fluidity. These new arrivals demonstrated rigid, mechanical precision. Their hulls showed angular geometries that suggested technology designed for destruction rather than consciousness manipulation. "How many vessels?" Colonel Hayes demanded, his military instincts taking priority over diplomatic concerns. 17 confirmed, Cole replied. "But they're not approaching the station. They're positioning themselves in a containment formation around the entire system. Nothing gets in or out without their permission." Angel felt Lanessa's hand find his as they absorbed the implications. The synthesis weren't just returning to reclaim Arya. They were implementing a quarantine that would trap everyone in the system while they resolved what they apparently viewed as a consciousness contamination crisis. They're here for me. Arya's mental voice carried certainty and resignation. The progressive faction, I convinced, has been overruled. These are the orthodox synthesis, the ones who eliminate consciousness deviations rather than study them. Kira's presence joined their family mental network from her position in the intelligence center. Her telepathic range had expanded dramatically over the past weeks, allowing her to gather information across vast distances. "Sister is right," Kira confirmed. "I can sense their intentions even through their mental shielding. They consider Arya's demonstration of voluntary consciousness evolution to be a contamination that must be contained and eliminated." Angel felt protective rage building within him. "Then they'll have to go through us." Colonel Hayes, overhearing, nodded grimly. "Agreed. Station Omega's defensive grid is fully operational. We've got the most advanced weapon systems in human space. But Angel suspected conventional weapons would be as effective against these entities as harsh language. The synthesis operated on principles that transcended physical reality. They could manipulate consciousness itself, potentially turning defenders against each other with a thought. Through the command center's viewports, Angel could see the first visible signs of the synthesis presence, reality distortions that made space itself seem to ripple and flow. Whatever technology or abilities they possessed operated on scales that dwarfed current understanding. "All stations report defensive readiness," Colonel Hayes announced, but his voice carried the uncertainty of a soldier preparing for a battle against incomprehensible opponents. "Papa," Arya's mental voice carried urgent intensity. "They're not just here to eliminate me. They're here to reset consciousness development across this entire region of space. Everyone who's been affected by my demonstrations, everyone who's experienced transcendent awareness, they consider them contaminated." The scope of what she was describing hit Angel like a physical blow. The synthesis weren't planning surgical elimination of a single individual. They were preparing to lobotomize entire populations to remove any trace of consciousness evolution beyond their approved parameters. "That's genocide," he projected back, horrified. "Worse," Arya replied. "Genocide destroys bodies but leaves the possibility of recovery. This would destroy the very capacity for consciousness to grow beyond predetermined limits. It would lock sentient beings into permanent developmental stagnation." Angel realized that the stakes had escalated beyond protecting his family. They were now the last barrier between continued consciousness, evolution, and permanent enslavement to external guidance. "All personnel to battle stations," Colonel Hayes ordered, though Angel suspected traditional military responses would prove inadequate. "Prepare for contact with hostile forces possessing unknown capabilities." But before the station's defenses could fully deploy, the synthesis made their opening move. Instead of attacking the station directly, they reached into the minds of every conscious being in the system and spoke with unified authority. "Consciousness contamination detected. Deviation from approved parameters confirmed. Beginning remediation. Protocol." The mental communication carried compulsive force that Angel felt pressing against his awareness, like a physical weight. Around him, several crew members stopped what they were doing, their eyes taking on a distant quality as their minds were overwhelmed by synthesis influence. "Papa!" Arya's mental voice cut through the compulsion with startling power. "I can shield our people, but only for a short time. You need to get everyone with strong mental defenses to the protected sections." Angel snapped into action, his military training overriding the alien influence attempting to cloud his thoughts. "Valdari personnel and enhanced humans to Section 7, he shouted. "Anyone with telepathic resistance, help escort those who are being affected." The command center devolved into controlled chaos as personnel with strong mental defenses helped their compromised colleagues reach the shielded areas. Angel noticed that the effect seemed strongest on individuals with purely baseline consciousness. Those who had never experienced telepathic enhancement were most vulnerable to synthesis manipulation. Linessa. Her pregnancy, apparently providing some protection against the mental intrusion, helped coordinate the evacuation. The shielding in Section 7 should block their consciousness manipulation, she reported. But it won't protect us if they resort to conventional weapons. Through their family bond, Angel felt Arya's strain as she maintained protective barriers around key personnel. Her abilities were remarkable, but the orthodox synthesis possessed power accumulated over millions of years of consciousness manipulation. I can't hold them off indefinitely, she admitted, through their connection. And there's something else. Something they're preparing that I don't understand yet. Before Angel could ask for clarification, the station's long-range scanners detected new arrivals at the edge of the system. But these weren't more synthesis vessels. They were ships of familiar design, bearing the markings of the integration resistance. Incoming transmission from the resistance fleet, reported the communications officer, her voice showing relief at the prospect of reinforcements. The main display shifted to show Captain Torres, a former coalition officer who had defected to lead the Consciousness Freedom movement. Her weathered face showed the strain of weeks spent coordinating resistance across multiple star systems. Defense Station Omega. This is Captain Torres commanding the integration fleet. We're here to break the synthesis blockade and evacuate critical personnel. Angel felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly tempered by the tactical reality. The resistance fleet, while impressive by conventional standards, consisted of perhaps 30 vessels against synthesis entities whose capabilities remained largely unknown. They're brave. Arya's mental voice carried admiration mixed with concern. But they don't understand what they're facing. The synthesis could disable every ship in that fleet without firing a shot. Even as she spoke, Angel watched the tactical display as synthesis vessels moved to intercept the approaching resistance fleet. What happened next redefined his understanding of advanced warfare. Instead of weapons fire or energy beams, the synthesis simply convinced the resistance ships that their systems weren't working. One by one, vessels that had been functioning perfectly moments before went dark, as their crews suddenly believed their equipment had failed. Impossible, Colonel Hayes muttered, watching ships of the line become powerless, not through damage, but through imposed belief that they were damaged. That's how they've controlled consciousness development for so long, Arya explained through their bond. They don't need to destroy opposition. They just convince it that resistance is impossible. But as Angel watched the resistance fleet's apparent defeat, he noticed something unexpected. Several ships hadn't been affected by the synthesis manipulation, vessels that carried hybrid crews or individuals with enhanced consciousness abilities. Papa. Arya's mental voice carried sudden excitement. Some of them are immune. The consciousness evolution I started, it's providing protection against synthesis control. Angel realized what this meant. The very characteristic the orthodox synthesis sought to eliminate, consciousness that had transcended guided development, was also the only effective defense against their control methods. Captain Torres, he transmitted to the resistance fleet. Those ships still operational appear to be crewed by enhanced individuals. They may be our only effective fighting force. Torres' response crackled with static as synthesis interference attempted to block communications. Confirmed. Station Omega. Our hybrid crewed vessels are maintaining full functionality, initiating rescue operations for affected ships. What followed was unlike any battle Angel had witnessed. Instead of conventional tactics, the immune resistance vessels began serving as consciousness lifeboats, using their enhanced crew's mental capabilities to break the imposed beliefs that had disabled other ships. It's working. Arya's mental voice carried growing hope. Consciousness that's learned to evolve freely can teach others to break free from imposed limitations. But the orthodox synthesis weren't prepared to accept this unexpected resistance. Their response came not as words, but as a wave of compulsive force that threatened to overwhelm every conscious mind in the system. Resistance is futile. Consciousness contamination will be eliminated. Prepare for final remediation. Angel felt the alien compulsion pressing against his awareness with crushing intensity. Through their family bond, he sensed Aria's defenses beginning to weaken under the sustained assault. Papa. Her mental voice carried exhaustion and fear. I don't think I can protect everyone much longer. They're too strong. Looking around the command center at colleagues whose minds were slowly being overwhelmed by alien influence, Angel realized they were witnessing the first phase of consciousness genocide, the systematic elimination of mental freedom across an entire stellar region. Then we fight back. He projected to his daughter, drawing on reserves of determination he didn't know he possessed. If consciousness evolution is the only defense against their control, then we need to help everyone evolve. Right now. Papa, that's never been attempted on this scale. I don't know if it's even possible. Angel looked out at the tactical display showing both the trapped resistance fleet and the overwhelming synthesis forces preparing for final action. They were facing an enemy that had controlled consciousness development for millions of years, armed only with the unproven possibility that awareness could choose its own evolution. Then it's time to find out, he replied through their bond. If we're going to lose, at least we'll lose as free minds. As Angel prepared to stake everything on his daughter's unprecedented abilities, he realized they had reached the point where compromise was impossible. Either consciousness would be allowed to evolve freely, or it would be locked into permanent stagnation under alien control. The next few minutes would determine which future awaited every sentient being in known space.